since we can't smoke cigars, pour a glass of your favorite medicine because you're going to need it to make it through this episode. Tuesday was not good for Republicans and conservatives. We're going to have to talk about it. So medicate the best way you can because we're not going to sugarcoat just how things went on Tuesday because we got to talk about what we can do better if we want to win. And I know you're watching this podcast, you're listening to this podcast because you want to win. That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you have to self-medicate like I'm doing here, I don't know if you can see, my wife got me this. One of my favorite glasses. It's a scuba diving glass. It says the closer I get to the bottom, the farther away I am from idiots. And it tends to be pretty true. Let me introduce our guest for this week, and then we'll jump right into our discussion. We've got Aaron Delmar. He's the member of the Republican State Central Committee, also the Republican Committeeman for Palatine Township, and the Highway Commissioner. Obviously, the worst kept secret in politics is he's considering a run for governor. Aaron, glad to have you.
Thanks for having me on, Collin. Great to be back.
We also have with us a new guest. We've got Brad Knolhoff. He's chairman of the Clinton County Board. He and his wife were also on the ballot on Tuesday, so they've got some real world first person experience they can share here in our discussion. Brad, glad to have you on for the first time. And by the end of this, you'll learn when to hit the mute button and when not, because we didn't get any of that.
No, thanks for having me. This is actually my second time being here, Collin. So I'm actually here for my victory lap, episode 43.
Were you on all the way back in 43?
Yeah. So I'm here to take my victory lap because I said in that episode, I think I was called a conspiracy theorist, that Joe Biden was not going to be on the ballot in the election. And I'm just here to remind everybody I got that right.
All right.
Minute 11:43, just for the fact checkers. So.
All right. I'll have to go back and watch it. Clearly, I forgot you were on. So sorry for that, Brad. Glad to have you.
All good. Good to be back.
All right. And we got Hannah Billingsley, this is not her first time. At least I won't screw that one up. Former candidate for state representative, a small business owner, and somebody I rely on to bring some personality and some life and some fun to the experience. What's going on, Hannah?
I just want to say thanks for making me the last, because I know you like to save the best for last. So yeah, happy to be here. Brad, I know you're still new to Zoom because like Southern Illinois doesn't like get all the technology we do in DuPage. So welcome to Zoom, and excited to see all the things you're going to do on mute today.
The regional competition has already begun. I like it. Speaking of regional competition, we've got South and North. We've got Michael. We've got Chris. They tend to duke it out and fight over which part of Illinois is better. I don't know, Michael. Seemed like you had more wins than Chris on Tuesday. So what does that say about your feud?
Yeah, we got some level-headed people down here for the most part. There's a couple pockets of people that we're not too happy with, but there's always that.
I wish I got to just ride off of uncontested races and R plus 27 districts to revive victory laps.
Just complaining. Well, what do we expect? We missed you last week, Chris. I got texts from people saying, your episode was missing something because Eeyore wasn't there. So glad to have you back. Though I don't know we're going to need your depression this week. I think we can all bring enough of that ourselves.
Maybe I should be optimistic.
Go ahead, buddy.
Maybe I should be optimistic this week, Collin, just to change it up a little bit.
Just to be the contrarian. That's right. I would expect nothing less from you.
That's right.
All right, let's go to our first topic. This whole episode, we're basically going to be talking about Tuesday's local elections. We're going to try to break up the discussion into separate sections just because it's easier for people to follow. So first, we just got to talk about what happened. And what happened is Republicans, conservatives, center-right had a real bad night. There certainly were some pockets. I'm sure some of you will share some wins that we had, which is great. That's awesome. But on the whole, it was real bad. I mean, you just look throughout the state. A lot of talk has gone on about Capital Township down in near Springfield and how that's the first time they've gone blue. I know up by us up here, you've got Barrington Township, the whole Republican slate except for one lost. Our client won. I'll point that out. I won't try to be too proud on this episode, but we did have 69 wins at Strategy, so we had a pretty good night. Nice. But Barrington Township's going to go blue for the first time in probably ever. All throughout McHenry County, we saw some challenges. You saw that McHenry Township now has a Democrat on the board. We saw Grafton Township flip to Democratic control. Of course, we had some mayor races. You had Irvin lose, Pecaw lose, Taylor lose in Waukegan, Toms in Rock Island, Rebeletti in Addison Township. I could do a lot more than that. And I'm sure you guys will fill in the gaps here. But all throughout the state, there's a reason why Democrats are feeling real good. They ran a big program and they crowed about wins. I mean, DuPage County, they won, 48 out of 49 of their races, and they're still holding out hope on the last one. It was a real good night for Democrats, not so good for Republicans. So, what did you guys see? I'm just going to have some drinks while you guys talk.
Well, I think in the Metro East, we kind of had a little bit of a mixed bag. There were some races that were disappointing, like Wood River Township, City of Alton, Swansea. Those were pretty rough. But we did have some pretty big victories. Like in the village of Caseyville, we won the mayor's race. It looks like we're going to win all three trustees. Mississippi Valley Library District, we won 2 out of 3 seats. So we've got a conservative majority on there by 2 now. So we did have some. Stookie Township, we swept the whole thing. So we had some victories. Even Edwardsville School District, we won all 4. And a lot of those, Collinsville Township, we won everything but assessor. And a lot of those are ironically in Katie Stewart's district. So we're going to have a lot more allies going into this next election. Erica Harris is going to have more allies when she's running for re-election on the state Senate side. So it's not all, sunshine and rainbows down here. But we do have some things that we can really be proud of.
Okay. Well, I always rely on you to bring the positivity, though. As you said, there certainly was some races we didn't like, even in your region.
Yeah,
obviously, up by us, it was a challenge.
We had a pretty rough run out here in Northern Cook area, as you can imagine. This is kind of the battleground for us. We're right on the border of Lake County. Wheeling Township, unfortunately, lost all 4 trustees and their supervisor. Kathy Penner has been a great committeeman out there, a great supervisor for many years. That was a really tough loss. Schaumburg Township lost all their trustees. In 21, they won again here in 25. They lost all of the other electeds that were contested. Barrington Township, like you mentioned earlier, Collin, first time going Democrat. They've got 3 of their trustees that lost. You got Tim O'Donnell, who's in that race. He's only up by 15 votes. If absentee ballots come in, I think that might be a change, and we might lose Tim over there as a trustee. Supervisor, we lost. Northfield Township lost a ton. Tim Ruckert, who was a longtime highway commissioner out there, great guy, did a great job. He lost. It was really bad all around Northern Cook. And I think part of that reason, and I'm sure we'll dive more into it, is that people weren't really looking at strategy. They weren't looking at the bellwether of where the winds were blowing. We can't control the wind, but we control the sails. And we as Republicans really need to start playing high-level 3D chess. We have a lot of people that are playing checkers. We got a lot more people that are playing Connect Four, and we got to get rid of those that are playing Guess Who.
Yeah, Aaron, feel free. I know Brad took his victory lap. If you want to take your victory lap here, I know you took a lot of flack for the I don't know how to word it. I'm just going to say the deal you cut. I hope that's okay to word it that way in Palatine Township. Talk about that and feel free to crow a little bit because it worked out.
Well, sure. So for what Collin's referring to, for those that are just joining us, earlier on in the cycle back into 24, we addressed after the November election, we looked through all of our numbers and how many people came out for Donald Trump, how many people came out for Kamala Harris. We ran the numbers probably 6 or 7 times because we wanted to be incredibly confident and sure in our math. And what we noticed was that Palatine, which has predominantly historically been a Republican township, since I took over as committeeman in 2010, we saw that the winds were changing. And unfortunately, we saw that Donald Trump got less votes in Palatine Township in 2024 than he did in 2020. Kamala Harris won it by 20 points. We also felt like there was a lot of invigoration and anger and angst that was happening on the Democratic side. Taking those numbers into account and realizing that, as everybody knows, in these odd cycled years, Republicans have to run against Democrats. We're the only races in township government in these cycles that have a designation of Republican or Democrat. And we understood that it was going to be a really challenging uphill battle. We had 2 of our strongest Republicans retire and go on. Our clerk and one of our trustees moved. One of them moved to Indiana. The other one retired for business purposes. So we had 2 openings. And we said, hey, you know what? This is a really tough decision to make, but it maybe if we reach out to the other side, because we all live in the same town, we are in Palatine, maybe if we can work something out where we can give maybe 1 trustee and we replace the other one with one of our people, maybe we can work out a situation. And that's what we did. The Democrats were a little bit upset and a little tired, and they really pushed hard. It was a fight just here locally in our own town, But we end up saying, okay, we'll give you one trustee. We'll take the other 7. And because of that, I took a lot of heat. I got, from other members of my state central committee, other people that have run for high office, even, a former gubernatorial candidate came at me with, torches and pitchforks because of that decision, calling for my resignation all across the board. But it wasn't giving up on the party. It was making a strategic decision based on where the winds were headed. And I said, you know what, I'll take this heat. I knew going into it that it was going to be really challenging and I was going to get scorched a little bit, but we held on. And in this cycle, Palatine Township is a super majority Republican township. And there's nobody around us. Even going up into Lake County, everybody is gone. And so for at least the next 4 years, Palatine Township will be that super majority. And, what I think people need to understand is that being in charge of the government means a lot. It's not just about winning races. You actually have to govern. And so when we saw what happened in some of the other townships a little bit farther than us that lost in 21, their budgets doubled. Their levies went up by 75%. They started bringing in national political issues that don't have any place in township government, where limited services are what we need to make sure that we're taking care of those that aren't having, disproportionate circumstances. And so you saw what happened in some of those areas, and we weren't going to allow that to happen in Palatine. And the main issue that I had in being a committeeman, my job is to get Republicans elected. And that's exactly what I did. Now, people may not agree with the way that I did it, but the job got done, and the people of Palatine are going to have conservative representation for the next 4 years. And we can reevaluate what we're going to do in 2029, and see where we're at. And maybe we don't do something like this, and maybe we get that seat back. But I'm happy to say that we got the victory that we're looking for, and all the naysayers all around. I mean, the biggest screamers and yellers lost 8 out of 8 townships in those areas. DuPage County, had a really rough night too. And the fact of the matter is, we are going to be able to make sure that the people of Palatine Township have the same services and the same conservative government that they've expected for the last 30 years, and that's continuing. And I think that's what really matters.
Yeah, I mean, your move sparked a pretty robust debate on one of our podcasts, and we talked about it. And you can check the tape. I don't remember exactly what was discussed. I know there were some people who were for it, some people who were against it. My concern was more that this is the kind of thing that sticks around. I mean, for you, all it takes for if you do run for governor, which I'm not on the inside. I'm not part of your team. So for those watching, I don't know what your plans are. But if you do run for governor, this is an easy thing for someone outside of your area, let's say in DuPage, to say, Aaron Del Mar cut a deal with Democrats. And you know how politics is. The truth doesn't necessarily matter. It's, who can spin the truth the best. And I know that's one of the main points I made, which was as a potential candidate for governor, and at the time, as a Republican leader, as the co-chair of the Republican Party, maybe it doesn't work on that side of things. As the committeeman for Palatine Township, I know Chris is itching to say this. You made a deal. It worked out. You were right. I think we have to admit on the podcast, at least as the Palatine Township Republican committeeman, it was the right call. My issue is, and you and I know, I've joked with you about this. I think you wear too many hats, you take on too many roles, and I think that's where on some of those other roles, this might bite you. Should it? No, because you're right. It worked. But I could see you, if you do run for governor, I could see this being a thing next January where those opponents that you're talking about who hate your guts are going to be like, he cuts deals with Democrats, he's evil, he's bad, vote against him in a primary. And unfortunately, I think we've all watched this Republican Party. That's the kind of message that could sadly work. And that's, I think, what was my concern then and still is for you now. You were right, and you deserve to take a victory lap. My question is, are people still going to use this against you in your future political endeavors?
Well, if you want to get something get something done, Collin, you got to give it to somebody that's busy. I work all the different hats that you mentioned, but we get it done at a very high level because I surround myself with the best and the brightest available. And, I haven't made a firm decision if I'm running for governor or not, but I can tell you this, whoever becomes the governor of Illinois, if it's one of our people, which I think it will be, you have to be able to work with the other side. And I know a lot of people don't like that, but you know what? The reason Republicans get mad a lot of times when we make deals is because we're usually on the short end of the stick. And it's usually for self-gain, right? And people don't like that. I don't like that. But in this specific situation, which I think needs to be scaled and replicated across the state, the Republicans came out 7-1. It was in our victory. I mean, the opposition wanted a lot more than I gave them. I said, you get one, that's it. If not, we'll have scorchers, we'll have a big bonfire, and we'll light the whole township up. We all can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, that was the leverage that I had in order to be able to do that. And they know that I'm the kind of guy that's willing to do those kinds of things to win. But if you're going to be the governor, you're going to have a super minority in the House. You're going to have a super minority in the Senate. And you have to be strategic and you have to be playing chess. You want to fight every battle and die on every hill, you're not going to be a successful leader in our state. But if you can stand for our principles, stand for our integrity, and most importantly, stand for the heat. Like, I knew I was going to take heat back in December, but I knew that it was going to pay off in April, which it did. It was a strategic decision. It wasn't something that I was cowarding out. You know me, Collin. I'm a fighter. I mean, that's my thing. But you have to be able to make those hard decisions and do that. And I think that's what the true test of leadership is. You know, I think there's a lot of people around the state like that agree with maybe what you said and rather see you lose everything, but go down fighting. We fought hard, but we lost all 8 seats, right? You can't get any policy through. If you want to be a strong conservative, if you want to do what's right for the state, and you want to hold the budgets low, if you want to make sure conservative values are adhered to, the only way you can do that is by winning and winning races. And that doesn't always mean that, you know, on the campaign side. Sometimes there's strategic moves that people can make that they have available to them to get those wins. And I just gave you a good example of one of them, right? That one Democrat can do it and scream and yell and do whatever they want to do, but they're not going to change any positions because we got 7 more people, right? That was the move that needed to be made, and it was a very low risk move.
I know Chris has got thoughts here. We'll make this its own agenda item since we've been talking about it for so long. Chris, go ahead and jump in. I know you've been itching to do it.
Look, they hated Aaron Del Mar because he told the truth, and that's the reality of the situation. If looking back I bet a lot of people wish they had called the Democrats up and say, "Hey, you want a township trustee? Okay, sounds good." A lot of less money would have been spent that could have went to other races like school board races, local races, park district races, library board races that were spent on township races and ended up going up in flames because the wins were against the Republican Party right now. And outside of, I think, literally one township in all of Cook County and the suburban area, your Republican Party, if you had seats, you probably lost seats on Tuesday night at the township level. And the fact that Aaron, I mean, listen, I'm sounding like I'm stroking Aaron's ego over here, but like I was Aaron's biggest defender. I'm going to say I was right. This was the right thing to do. And when you're looking at DuPage County, there's a great graphic I saw on Twitter, and I'm never calling it X, by an account named Uncrude. His politics is not my own, and I sent this to Lane, so maybe he could bring it up in post. But it takes you through DuPage County township elections and how much they've lost this year and every year since 2013. You know, Addison Township is a township that Trump won that we're losing right now. Okay? And there's these other townships that were, you know, let's look at York Township.
Township. A good example is Milton Township. I mean, it's Jeannie Ives' backyard. Let's talk Milton Township.
Yeah, Milton Township was Harris plus 17.8, and they got blown out of the water out in Milton Township. Okay, and yeah, they fought the good fight. And we're going to talk about why there's losses here in one of the next topics. But here's the thing. At a township level, you're talking about paving unincorporated roads, driving seniors to the doctors, and counting the food cans at the food pantry. If you need to give a Democrat an extra a township trustee spot in order to make sure seniors get to the doctor and you don't have to raise the property tax levy, everybody should be doing this. But unfortunately, people got too complacent, and that's going to go into the next topic that we talk about. And this was a smart move, Aaron. I commend you for doing so. And if people want to call me a rhino for doing it, I've never considered myself a Republican. So you're
well, listen, you use that word, Chris, rhino. I mean, I think, Aaron, the greatest thing you may have accomplished here is you got self-described chief rhino hunter Tom DeVore to admit that maybe we should actually be strategic in this party. And maybe every once in a while it does make sense to work with Democrats. I think if the greatest thing you may have accomplished in all of this was getting Tom DeVore to admit that in public. So I know you guys are buddies. You're going to have to defend him after I stop talking. But I think, honestly, just joking aside, I mean, we're talking about somebody who has attacked any Republican who has ever dared even take a photo with a Democrat. But here he's coming out publicly saying you were right. So, hey, kudos for getting Tom DeVore to admit maybe we should actually start thinking strategically in this party.
Well, you know, Tom does whatever Tom does. I mean, you know, we certainly are friends, but, you know, Tom makes his own decisions for what he does. Sometimes I agree with him, sometimes I don't. But I think he does have a really good, you know, audience that listens to him all across the state. You know, the guy gets 10 million some views and, you know, and brings a lot of things to light, shines the light where it needs to be shined. But going back to it, I mean, I'm not suggesting that everybody go out and make deals with Democrats. Let's be really clear about it. But in strategic times that we can do that, and when the headwinds are on our way, then you need to be able to evaluate it as one of the tools in your toolbox. Now, if Kamala Harris would have won and I would have seen that the Republican engagement was really higher, there's no way in the planet I would have made any kind of deal because I know that we could have won that race and the things that we needed to do it. But across the state, if we can replicate getting more Republicans into government, get people seeing how we run the government and earn their trust, we can start taking Illinois back. And that's really what we need to do. We need to be able to get our policy through. We got to get our people elected so we can get that policy into law.
Yep. Anyone else have thoughts on what happened before we get into why it happened and what we need to grow from here? Just make sure that anyone else who has thoughts has had a chance to share them.
Something curious to me happened in a city adjacent to where I live. I live in West Chicago. Our 3-term mayor, he's Republican. Yeah, he lost. I don't even think he got a third of the votes because it was a 3-way race. But in St. Charles, if anybody was tracking that one, there was a mayor there, Laura Vitek. She's been there since before COVID, really well liked, and has like a great track record, great reputation. And a Republican named Clint Hull, it was like a decisive victory on Tuesday night. And I was really surprised by that. Only because my best friend lives in St. Charles and she is the biggest Trumper you'll ever meet. She has the Trump flag that she brings out every 4 years and has like merch and all of that. And even she voted for Laura Vitek, who is a Democrat, because my best friend's a small business owner. She liked how Laura handled COVID, all these things. And then for this guy to win when really nobody else in the area, no other Republicans won, it was kind of like a big surprise for me. The only thing I can think of is there's a group there called the Kane County Warriors, and they're very focused on electing people. So I think that's probably a big part of it. But yeah, that was something that kind of was curious to me from Tuesday night.
That is interesting. I mean, you look at even Kane County didn't do super well. I mean, Elgin and Dundee townships all got swept by the Democrats. So I think all throughout Kane, there weren't a lot of wins. But to your point, there are specific instances, and we'll talk about these. There were instances where Republicans did win or conservatives did win. I think we can learn from some lessons from those people.
One thing, Collin, when you're looking at each of these individual races, when we start getting into them, we also have to remember that there are microorganisms that happen in each of these township cities that create those environments, right? So we can't look at everything with the macro lens. We were saying, oh, it's Republican versus Democrat. And some of the ones like we talk about in Orland, where we talk about in Aurora, those ones had a lot of internal stuff going on within the government side and the local level that can't be swept up in the Republican versus Democrat broom.
Yeah, true. I also want to know, you said microgasm. Is that, I don't know how dirty I can get in my jokes here. I mean, it's a new word here, but I'm wondering if, maybe we gotta work on that. I think we gotta get the a little more than just a microgasm here. Come on. All right. I wish I had like 17 jokes all collide in my head and none of them.
Collin, if you want to know how much room you have about 6 inches of room.
Okay. All right. I was expecting 4, so 6 is good. I think that's more than a microgasm. I'll have to ask Sarah what her opinion is on this. All right. Let's go to our. Actually, Brad, real quick. I know you had some wins in the family there. So why don't you close us out on this topic and just give us a report from you?
Well, here's my thing with this consolidated election. Everybody likes to talk about the end result, and I think Aaron was partially right in the strategy from the standpoint of they were planning this out during petition filing. I think where we as Republicans make this mistake is we talk about it after the fact. There needs to be some strategy put into this. The number of races we had as write-ins because the filing date was moved up a little bit. There was no strategy put into it on the front end of trying to find good candidates to run in these races. I went through just before this podcast. I looked at our sample ballot. I think there's only 8 contested races in our county. So, there's not a lot of engagement when it comes to getting people on the ballot. And then the races where there are races, it's not really Republican or Democrat. It's the single issue. We had one town. It was over whether or not we were going to open up a gas station. It's currently being kept shut by the city. Another town is whether or not we're going to build a building. And those issues are okay today. But when you get into governing, as Aaron talked about, you don't get the right people in those positions. So, I think what we need to do if we want to win more of these races, it's got to start 6 months before the election. It's got to start, in finding the candidates, teaching them the values, teaching them what the local government's about and how much they can affect. For me, it's disappointing when you see counties that have 8% voter turnout, and probably an average turnout across Illinois is probably closer to 18 to 20%. But in Clinton County alone, where I'm at, over $47 million of property tax dollars get spent by the people that were on that ballot. And to have only that few of contested races and that much voter engagement is disappointing. So I think when we talk about strategy doesn't come the day after the election. Strategy comes 6 months before the election. So I think that's where we need to do better.
Yeah, listen,
Hey, Collin.
you're preaching to the choir. I mean, you got Michael and Chris here who, they were stuck in the last election leading up to November, trying to get all of our November clients elected, while also out there recruiting for the 2025 local elections, having to do both things at the same time. Because you're right, the Democrats moving this election earlier meant, passing petitions in the middle of the November presidential election, which, was obviously ridiculous. And most political organizations didn't have that capacity. I know Chris and Michael haven't had a good night's sleep in like 9 to 12 months because of it. So you're right. It wasn't convenient. It was a lot of work. But when you put in the work, you see the results.
Yep.
Hey, Collin, can I comment real quick? I want to say something with Brett, off of what Brad said, and he makes a great point about strategy and such. But the other bigger issue that I think people are going to see, and I'm calling it now, right, today on April 3rd of 2025, one of the things that Democrats did is they went out and they recruited a whole bunch of candidates. And when they did the recruitment for all these township races, they didn't go and get the best and the brightest. They found anybody with a pulse. And that is the biggest thing that concerns me right now. They put a whole bunch of people that are really unqualified all over these township races, any human being that they could find and get their name on a ballot to agree to them, right? And they haven't even really done a whole lot of vetting to them. So I'm sure you're going to see a lot of nefarious characters coming out on this. So what you're going to see right now is you're going to see a whole bunch of people that don't know what they're doing, that have no idea about good public policy, good government, or whatever, that are going to trash our township system. And they're going to ruin a lot of it. And again, there's examples of it you can see from 21, but that is the thing that we should be the most concerned about now. And those Republicans that didn't get the result that they wanted on Tuesday need to be aware of that. And they need to go to these township meetings and they need to hold these newly elected people accountable for their errors, their mistakes, and their omissions when they're running this government, because that is what's really going to turn the tide.
Yeah, well, and let us know. I mean, if you're out there, you see these Democrats who've taken over your township or your municipality, pay attention, as Aaron said, to what they're doing. And then when you see them do something dumb, because they're going to do something dumb, let us know, let other people know. We will shine a spotlight on that. And frankly, it's a great opportunity for us to show just how Democrats can't lead, because a lot of these Democrats that got elected are going to be chasing this far left progressive agenda, as we've seen happen. You saw it happen in DuPage County. They took over DuPage and ran DuPage into the ground. They took over Lake County. They've been running Lake County into the ground. They're going to make a lot of these townships, these municipalities look like Cook County, look like Chicago. And you need to find those instances, call them out, so we can use those as examples statewide of why you need responsible Republicans, responsible conservatives in leadership positions. So you've got a tough job ahead of you if you live in one of those townships or municipalities, but you better do your job here and help us identify and shine a spotlight on when these problems are happening, because that's your job now. We got to win these back in 2, 4, 6, 8 years. Let's move to our next topic. Brad, let me get us to our next topic here, because we got to keep moving along. This next one is going to be a short one. It's going to be a quick one, but I wanted this onto the agenda for a really specific point, and that is that this is a big deal. For anyone who's looking at this like, guys, it's not that big of a deal. We got that reaction a lot. When we were trying to get parties to pay attention to the local races way back in September, when it was time to pass petitions, we got a lot of people like, no, all that matters is Trump. Just get Trump elected. That's all that matters. And even since then, we've been trying to shine a spotlight on these races, trying to convince people to get involved. And we've gotten a lot of apathy back. Oh, whatever. It doesn't matter. We've got Trump, Elon, Doge, whatever. It's all good. We got what we needed. And we just learned what happens on Tuesday. We just learned what happens when you're complacent on your side of the aisle. Republicans, conservatives were absolutely complacent here. And this is a problem. And here's why it's a huge problem. A few of you hinted at this. This is the bench. One of the few bright spots we had as conservatives, as Republicans, was at the local level. Aaron brought up Schaumburg Township. Let's talk about Schaumburg Township. At the state level, at the federal level, they've been voting deep blue for the last decade. But at the local level, they voted conservative. They voted Republican. That was at least a sign of hope in a place like Schaumburg that has gone more blue. All throughout Cook County and the suburbs, even when they're voting for Democrats like Sean Casten and Lauren Underwood, or pick your state legislator, they were voting for center-right leaders in their communities. Tuesday's the first time in all the time I've been doing politics in Illinois where we saw at the local level, we saw people voting Democrat or progressive. That's a serious problem. It eliminates the one place that conservatives and Republicans were actually doing well. It eliminates the only source of a bench that we've ever had in this state because we don't build a bench anywhere else. This, I can't overstate it. This is a massive problem. What happened Tuesday is not a small thing. This is a huge problem, and it better be a wake-up call for Republicans and conservatives, because if you don't learn from this, 2026 is going to be an absolute bloodbath. And I thought we couldn't go any further down, but we will if we don't learn from what happened Tuesday. So this doesn't have to be a long topic, but if anybody wants to build on that, feel free.
Collin, to your point real quick, sorry, Brad. Collin, you talked about Schaumburg Township. In 2021, Schaumburg Township lost all of their 4 trustees, their executive stayed, who actually got all blown out on Tuesday. But in the 3 years that Schaumburg Township had 4 Democratic trustees, their township budget went from $6 million to $12 million. They bought 4 electronic buses with charging stations. They created a DEI commission. They had a costly renovation project, and they added 30% more additional employees to the budget. That is just what happened in Schaumburg. In Northfield Township, they created a new township office. They spent about $3.7 million, would have been only $560,000 in order to repair the one that they had. They increased the township supervisor's salary by 55%. They spent an additional $50,000 on office equipment and an astonishing $50,000 on marketing and $20,000 on branding for township government under 4 years of just 4 trustees in those 2 areas as an example. That's what you're going to see all over DuPage, all over the other ones. That's why this was so important.
Well,
hold on, Michael. Brad's been trying to jump in for a while.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm glad you went first, Aaron, because the kind of exemplifies my point. My point is when you see your neighbors, because that's who's in these elections, it's your neighbors. And when you see your neighbors doing those things, the people that you see that live down the street, it disenfranchises you as a voter. And I think that that's one of our problems. You know, our problem isn't that we don't have enough Republicans in the state of Illinois. The problem is we don't have enough Republicans voting in the state of Illinois. And when they see that their neighbors aren't showing up to vote, or their neighbors are causing these issues, they say, what's the point of voting? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether I elect somebody I know or not. You know, I get these bad results. And if you don't have the right people in these positions in local government, you know, you get that voter apathy, which does not help us in the long run. So that's where my concern's at with these local races.
I think even more so.
Hold on. I had to cut Michael off, so now I got to cut you off. Michael gets to go next. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, I think historically, like, especially in my area, Republicans have kind of shied away from being involved in the municipal elections. They're like, oh, they're independent. It's nonpartisan. All we care about is November. But I was like, no, we're going to be very aggressive and we're going to do everything we can to get some of these people elected. I mean, we were working hard with our, counterparts in Madison County on those races that crossed the county line. I explicitly endorsed, 22 candidates for the April election. We sent out letters to Republicans that vote in municipals, and 15 out of the 22 won on April 1st. So I think we can't shy away from doing those things. You have to be strategic about it. You have to make sure that you're getting the message out to the people that it's actually going to be impactful with. But we can really make some inroads here, and I think we have in the Metro East, which I think is going to help us be more successful in 2026.
Wise words from the mayor of Butlerville. Chris, go ahead.
I think even more so than the lack of a bench, which is a very, very big problem, because as we know, the Republican Party in the state doesn't have a bench. You're also losing the last bully pulpit, because a lot of these local elected officials were Republicans. And people, even if people didn't recognize them to be Republican explicitly because they didn't have an R next to their name, they were an example of good government by a Republican or a person who votes Republican. So it was somebody who could speak to conservative issues, Republican issues, and not necessarily have the same baggage that a super minority state representative would be, who isn't even from your area. Because again, these people are your neighbors. Republicans get elected in the strangest places in this state. For example, the township supervisor of Proviso is the Republican committee person. Why that is, I can't speak to that, but he is. But when you don't have things like that, you don't have a Republican speaking for the community that would be there otherwise. When the Democrats take over, they take over everything, and they move the entire narrative in their direction. These local officials are important because it makes it seem like Republicans are normal people. These have been the most normal Republicans in the entire state, in the entire country, and your local mayor. And when they're not there, you're left in an echo chamber of party activists who are important. But that's all there is to speak their conservative message to the masses. When you don't have mayors, when you don't have supervisors, when you don't have trustees, when you don't have school board members to bring that message to them.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chris. All right, let me move us to our next topic, which is why this happened. A lot of people have shared their thoughts, I think, before we've had a chance. One of the problems with doing this podcast weekly is like some of the things like, oh, I really want to say this, and you got to wait 3 days before you can finally say it. So some things people have said, I'm sure you guys agree with. Some things you disagree with. I've got thoughts, but I'm going to wait till all you guys are done with your thoughts because I'm sure you're gonna say some things that I was already going to say. So, what do you guys think? Why did we lose so badly on Tuesday? We've shared some ideas already, but what stands out to you is the main reason why Tuesday was so bad for us?
Well, I think one of the reasons is, following a successful November election, we won the White House, we have the majority in the House and the United States Senate. You have Democrats, across, even in Illinois, that were extremely motivated, right? They're aggravated about what's going on in DC, and they're motivated to get out and make a statement. So I think that's a factor. And then I know we've talked about it in previous episodes that there was a lot of involvement from the Illinois Democratic Party. I mean, in Collinsville Township, they sent out mail to voters. Unfortunately, we basically cleaned their clocks in Collinsville Township. But in other areas, I think that had more of an impact. You had, congressmen like Lauren Underwood and Bill Foster that, were endorsing candidates and doing photo shoots with them and sending out mail. So I think they were a lot more aggressive in areas where it benefited them to be aggressive. And we didn't do those things. I mean, we didn't have, Congressman Boss doing photo shoots with people or Darren LaHood doing photo shoots with people or those kind of things. They were more aggressive.
Yeah, I mean,
you're going to start seeing that in 4 years. You're going to start needing to do that. I mean, the Democrats threw the gauntlet on the table. They're going to fight us at every different level. So now we're going to need other higher upper level Republicans and elected officials to start getting involved in this. To an earlier point, people are saying these are nonpartisan races. Well, that is out the window now. These are all partisan races, from school board to park board to library board. And going back to the townships for a second, one thing that really also hurt us on top of bad government coming, townships were our bench team, right? They're our summer league where we're trying to get people that, we want, that are precinct committeemen, that are getting involved in politics. We put them in trustee spots so they can start learning how to run the government, so they can start learning how to speak, they can start working with budgets and things like that. And then we can start farming them up and basically tutoring them how to become better elected officials and run for a higher office. By getting our farm team sweeped out, our bench is pretty short. We're going to have to go back to the well and start bringing new people along.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I think that there's a lot of reasons. Number one, I think, is complacency. I think in DuPage, specifically in northern Cook County, these people had been unbeatable for decades. Like, you could look back and say that there'd never been a Democratic elected official in some of these townships since the Johnson administration, and some of them since the Lincoln administration. So complacency, I think, is part of it. But from a broader perspective, it used to be the case that Republicans did very well in off-year elections and did very well in local elections because Republicans represent the informed constituency of the American Republic and American democracy. Republicans were the one who paid attention. Republicans were the one who showed up. And the Democrats were a hodgepodge of so many different conflicting interests and different ethnic groups and different ideologies that they really could never coalesce behind anything other than a presidential race that brought them all together. The inverse is now true. The Democrats are now the informed electorate, and the Republicans are the uninformed electorate. Republicans will show up for Trump. And somebody said that they're not. There are so many Republicans who are just Trump supporters who are not Republican supporters, and that's true. There are people who will show up for Trump, won't show up for anything else. Okay, with the Democrats, politics is at a higher level for them. The politics comes down to their school board race. Politics comes down to their township race because they are that informed. That guy's a Republican. That means he's with the orange man. I'm a Democrat. I don't like the orange man. I'm going to come out and vote for that guy. Republicans, you're like, is Trump on the ballot? Nope. Why am I showing up? I don't care. So I think that's a lot of it. Whoever is the person who can figure out how to get Trump supporters to show up and off your elections, not just for nonpartisan local races, but for other Republicans on the ballot, that person will be a multimillionaire, and they will make him chairman of the RNC. That has not happened yet, and this is a boulder that we are going to have to keep pushing up the mountain and trying to get that Trump supporters out to vote for other Republicans if the Republican Party has to be any viable. It's either that or you have to cast a much broader tent, which the current Republican Party doesn't really seem keen on doing. So those are your two options. And that's why things are so bad right now. So it's complacence, and it's also a complete change in the way the electorate works.
Well, and Chris, you talk about complacency. You brought up DuPage County. Let's talk about it. I mean, ultimately, we've seen this happen in DuPage. We've watched it. It's like that slow motion train crash. We've been watching it happen for 6, 8, 10 years now. And I know we all know why it's happened, but we've seen it on the ground. And the example I've given, and I think I've given it on one podcast before, but it was at a public event. And for whatever reason, nobody seemed to watch that one because it was during the holidays. So I think I'm safe giving it again, which is we saw this with the national organizations that I'm part of. We saw this in Texas. They recognized the fact that they had never had to fight to win before. And so as a result, they weren't tactically as smart when it came to campaigns and politics because they never had to fight to win. And that was DuPage County's problem, is they always won just by putting an R next to their name, putting the Republican elephant on their yard signs, and boom, done. We've won. And so when Democrats started to make inroads, they didn't know how to fight back. But the difference between DuPage County and Texas is Texas recognized it. They had hundreds, I'm not kidding, hundreds of trainings throughout their state to make sure that their grassroots, their Republicans, their elected officials, their party leaders, their committee people, everybody knew how to win because they never had to fight to win before. It was new for them. That was the difference between Texas and DuPage. And Texas, as a result, despite the fact that the media every year likes to be, is this the year Texas goes blue? And then it's not even close. It's not going blue because they've built that wall, pun intended, and they're fighting back and they know how to win. DuPage, on the other hand, no matter how many times we try to say, hey, let's do a training or let's talk about how we can improve and maybe learn tactically from some of our mistakes, they just keep doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the same things that have been losing for the last decade. And here we are. It's deep blue DuPage. It's not even purple DuPage anymore. But until they recognize that the things they're doing aren't working, you're not going to see a change. The Republicans need to recognize that we need to get better. We need to get smarter. It's not a bad thing to go to a training and learn how to be better because right now we are getting dwarfed and defeated by the other side. And there's no excuse for it because they suck. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But we're losing to a B League squad and yet somehow talking about how, ooh, they were so good, they beat us.
Democrats always needed to work harder for their elections for the reasons I specified earlier. They weren't a cohesive group of people, different ideologies, different ethnicities, all those other things. So when they took over DuPage County, are they doing the best job politically? No, even the Democrats aren't doing a good job politically in the state. I've been trying to tell people that for a long time, but they had the experience necessary to actually organize and build up a Democratic Party out there. The Republican Party, it was just, they controlled everything. I would argue that at one point it was a machine, but it wasn't necessarily a political machine as much as it was a governmental machine. They controlled every aspect of government, so they had the spoils of victory, but the moment
we lost patronage is the moment we fell apart.
Right. Well, that's not everything, but it's part of it, certainly, that, the Republican Party in a place like DuPage, they never had an organization. And I'm not exaggerating here, there are probably 10 precinct committees in the entire state of Illinois who actually do the full job of a precinct committee. Collin might disagree with me, but the reality of the situation is
if you're saying full job, like everything they're supposed to do, it's probably 10 to 20. Now, there's probably 100 who do most of what they're supposed to do, but you're right, who do everything that you're supposed to do in that role. Yeah, it may be 10 to 20. It's pretty rare.
So the problem isn't that we're running bad campaigns or we have bad political infrastructure. The reality of the situation is the Republican Party isn't running campaigns. They don't have any political infrastructure. Not really, not in any meaningful sense. Sure, when you look on the county clerk's website, you see a list of precinct committeemen, but what are those people doing? You see that these campaigns have committees and they spend money, but what are they spending it on? We're not losing a battle of ideas. We're not losing a war of attrition where it's this party knocks on this many doors and we knock on the same amount of doors and we hammer the turf and you know what, we lost and that's just the way the game goes. No, the Democratic Party has lapped the Republican Party about 4 times over, and they're like here, and they could be here, but they're not. And the Republican Party isn't even on the radar. That is why the Republicans keep losing. It's all the factors I've mentioned put together.
Yeah, I think he brings up a really good point, and I think the shorter way version is that we lack the fundamentals that we need to run races. And Collin, we've known each other a long time. You ran my first partisan race. I won by 43 votes. For a guy like me, I'm not used to winning by big margins or being able to just run on a Republican name. We've had to fight the whole time. And so Republicans got to start conditioning themselves to be able to have those fights and be able to fight for every bit of ground. I mean, Hannah can tell you that. I mean, she fought like a Viking when she was running for state rep. I mean, she would be like what I would consider the poster child of hard work, effort, opportunity, and doing it. I was incredibly proud to support her campaign and be a part of what she did. And somebody watching, how she treated that campaign and went full head on. We just can't have 4 people doing it. We just got to have more people that are engaged and wanting to get that win and burning the ships at the shore and going all in on it. And that's how you start getting more victories. Not just be like, oh, I did 2 mailers and we did a robocall and a text message and maybe ran $200 in Facebook ads. Like, if you're not all the way in it to win and you're not willing to sacrifice your time, your treasure, your talent, and your family life and your business life or whatever, then don't even get involved.
Yeah. Well, I think you see that. Let's talk about just what the 2 parties did. I didn't talk about it before Election Day. You can check the tape. I did not want to attack our party before Election Day, so I purposely pushed it back several times when I could have. And I was aware of what the party's plans were because I was involved in some of the discussions. Now I can talk about it. And let's talk about the reality. Democrats sent multiple mailings all throughout the state, not just one. Even in DuPage, they had volunteers handwriting get out the vote postcards, 80,000 of them just in DuPage. They did text messaging. They did digital ads. They had grassroots efforts, events. Chris or Michael or somebody talked about their celebrities, their elected officials coming out and knocking on doors with them. Chris Welch was out knocking on doors. Meanwhile, our party, we're just sitting on Facebook, talking about stuff, clacking away at our keyboards. And then the party decided 2 weeks out from Election Day, we'll do some digital ads in 7 counties targeted in 1 municipality. That's it. That's all we did. And you could say it's a difference of resources, and that's true. I have spoken multiple times about how it's unfair to compare the 2 parties because we just don't have the resources to have the staff. But you know what? We didn't even do the basics. We didn't even just put some interns on researching the partisan voting histories of every candidate and build a database and put it up online. Here's all the Democrats running for office. Here's all the Republicans. You can look it up in your township. We did that in 7 counties, but we couldn't do it in the whole state. I mean, the basics that don't require money, just effort. We didn't even do that. Yeah, they sent out a bunch of emails, but it was just all the emails that the party always sends out begging for money. That's it. There wasn't a cohesive effort here to try to drive up turnout, try to get Republicans out to the polls. And we knew in our races, we knew you couldn't count on those Trump voters to show up. So we had specific outreach to even hard R's. You couldn't just go to soft R's and low propensity Republicans. You had to even go to hard R's because you couldn't count on those Trump voters to show up. We knew it. Anybody with a political brain knew it. And yet the party didn't have any sort of an effort to ramp up turnout on our side. And it's not like we were surprised by the Democrats doing what they did. They did this 2 years ago. They told us that they were going to do this months and months and months ago. There's no excuse to have been caught on our asses here because Democrats told us they would do this. And while you could say maybe we couldn't have afforded mail, fine. But we could have done more than a week and a half of digital ads and a landing page and a website that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. We could have done a hell of a lot more than that.
Well, here's the thing too, Collin, and I get to your party thing, and I'm on the state central committee, and I see a lot of dysfunction and infighting, more time spent on that than fighting to get our people through. But also, I think you need to go back more granular than that and talk about personal accountability from each of the candidates. right? Each of the candidates have to be able to put their own money in. You can't depend on any party to be able to do that, especially not the Republican Party. So you have to put your own money into it. You have to go to your friends, your family, and fundraise. You have to knock on the doors yourself. You have to split up your team and do it. You have to have the fundamentals of getting the right campaign, using your money wisely. That is a bigger issue, because if we can do that individually, that will lift all of our ships. And a lot of these candidates that I'm watching, I wasn't even looking at some of the races on the numbers. I'm like, dude, they're not doing anything. They're going to lose. Like, nobody knows who they are. They didn't even get lawn signs, or they didn't want to fundraise. They didn't want to do any of the pieces that it takes. So we need to start getting candidates that are going to take personal accountability for their campaigns, instead of trying to lean on a party that's not going to do it for them.
Yeah, fair. I mean, that's been our reality. I mean, the sad reality is, since we started our company, we don't count on the Republican Party to get our candidates across the finish line. Most of the time, we got to work around them, or sadly, sometimes against them, to get good center-right candidates elected. And then you see the party. I mean, just talking about just before Election Day, ILGOP came out with their Election Integrity Committee, and we're going to audit and examine the municipal election rolls. Like, that's what they're spending time on. Instead of actually getting our candidates elected, we're spending time on voter fraud. Like, we lost so badly, there's no way you could ever blame voter fraud based on how bad we lost most of these races. Like, focusing on what actually matters and getting these candidates elected. Let's talk about vote by mail. I mean, Mark Batnick was right. He's been talking about this for several years, that Democrats have a huge advantage with vote by mail. We've ignored it. We've ignored ballot harvesting. We've ignored vote by mail. We've ignored voter turnout. We've ignored voter registration. The basics, the things that we do with our state party clients in other states that they just naturally do because it's obvious to them. When we tell them that Republicans in Illinois don't do those things, they stare at us like we are aliens. Like, are you serious? That's the basics. Like, that's walking and talking and breathing and eating. You guys don't do those things in Illinois? We do them in other states, and we win in other states. This is the basics of running a party in a state, or in your county, or in your region, or your township. Vote by mail is going to continue to be permanent. Vote by mail is going to continue to be a huge problem for conservatives and Republicans. And if we don't do something about it, we are going to lose basically permanently. You got to do something about voting early. And kudos to Batnick, who's been on our podcast a number of times. He would have been on today, but he's on vacation. And so we decided we wouldn't pressure him too hard to be on. But I know that's what he's been pushing, and he's right. We also had, you see, some of these other groups that got involved. Thank God you had, 150, which is a more of a center-right union. They tried to do what they could in some races like Irvin and Aurora and some of the others, but Democrats didn't just have the Democratic Party. I mean, Personal PAC was out there spending a good amount of money in a lot of these municipal races. You obviously had a number of left-of-center unions who were involved with a lot of these races. When we talk about, obviously Republicans not doing their part, we also just didn't have too many allies. I mean, AFP did a few small things. They were mostly focused on referendums, and they had some wins there, so kudos to them. But we didn't have a lot of support. So while Republicans didn't do our part, we also didn't have a lot of help from center-right organizations. A lot of them were like, hey, not our problem. I mean, I saw one of them post on Facebook, y'all didn't come to me, she said, and so you lost. It's your own fault. It's like, come on. We can't have that attitude. We're all on the same team here. Like, you should have been rowing this boat with everybody else, not going on Facebook right after election day going, look, haha, you lost because I didn't help you. Like, if we can't be in the same team, Democrats are just going to laugh their way to victory.
I think we also can't ignore the fact that Trump hit a new low in his approval ratings, like on election day. And I'm not for kicking the can, and I think I'm for personal responsibility. So I don't want to say it all comes down to Trump, but for him to hit a low and people go and vote on election day, they're thinking about the biggest Republican that they know. He's so iconic. And even though your next door neighbor who calls himself as a Republican looks and thinks and talks nothing like Trump, that's what a lot of people in the community are thinking when they see the R next to the name. So I think that may have played into it just a little bit.
Yeah, Hannah, you're 100% right. I mean, we've talked tariffs specifically on a few episodes in the recent past here on this podcast, and I've said, guys, we've got elections right now, because the response I always get on tariffs is, it's okay, we got a long time till 2026. And I'm like, but there are elections before 2026. We had the Wisconsin Supreme Court election, which we just lost. We had Illinois municipal elections. We've got Missouri's next week. There are elections that happen before 2026. And so when you're talking about, well, well, we've got a whole plan for tariffs, and don't worry, by the time it matters, this is all going to work out. And my argument is it matters right now. Candidates are running right now, and tariffs and the economic policy from Trump and Republicans right now in DC, it's killing us. And their only narrative, which there's very little messaging coming out, but what little they say is just give it time. Well, guess what? Voters aren't giving it time. It's tremendously unpopular with voters. And if you're a candidate, if you're a Republican going on the ballot right now, you're carrying that water for Trump and for the DC Republicans who refuse to message this and actually do their damn jobs. And so, yeah, I think some of these candidates paid the price for it. And I think you're absolutely right, Hannah.
Well, it's not just Trump and the tariffs. It's also everybody's favorite receiver of government grants and government funding, Elon Musk, who now apparently is going to be out now because the people in D.C. are realizing this guy's a complete political liability. Nobody likes Elon Musk. You have the richest guy in the world in charge of government austerity. Like, what's going on here, folks? So even Trump, apparently, according to Politico, this is an article that was written the other day, is moving to get Elon Musk out. And I, for one, I am so hopeful that this is the case because Elon Musk has been killing the Republican brand ever since he got put in charge of Doge. And I don't care what you think about austerity and cutting wasteful government spending. He's been a political liability from the beginning. Having the richest person in the world in charge of your government's a bad idea, and it's time for the Republican Party to wake up and realize that.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And that plays right into the last thing I was going to say that you guys kind of covered, which is messaging. I gave Jeannie Ives some flack, and I always like to be fair on these podcasts. When she was on Dan Proft's radio show, she was right in this instance, which was our messaging continues to be a problem. And we just talked about how tariffs was part of the problem, but tell me what the Republican Party stands for. Tell me what I'm going to get as an average voter. What do I get for voting Republican in this election? I don't know. I don't even know. We're going to talk about this in our great debate in 2 weeks, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But I don't even know. You ask me, what do you guys stand for as a Republican Party? What do I get if I vote for Republicans in Palatine Township? The hell that I know, we don't have a message. We've got no kind of a brand, no kind of a message. And that's not a knock on Palatine Township. It's the broader Republican Party that voters don't know what they're going to get if they vote for us. And that's part of our problem. We have been horrible at messaging, and we've been horrible for a very long time. And every time I rant about messaging, I get a few people like, Collin needs to stop ranting about messaging. But you know what? When we stop screwing it up, I'll stop ranting about it. But until we can figure out how to actually speak like normal human beings, we're going to keep losing elections. We got to talk about the things that matter to the everyday people of this state, the working families of the state. And until we can connect with them, we're never going to win. And that's a big problem. And I'll give kudos to Jeannie Ives. She was absolutely correct that we absolutely struggle with messaging. And we have been since the first day. I have an email. One day I'll publish it. I have an email that I wrote to a buddy of mine because I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I getting involved? And we talked about just how awful Republicans are at messaging. On the first day I was involved in politics back in, 2007, 2006? It's still true today. All right. So let's stop talking about the negatives. Let's talk about, negatives but positives. What can Republicans, what can conservatives, what can we learn from Tuesday with the goal of being better so we can actually go out and win some elections? There's been a lot of hot takes, as there always is after the election. I'm sure you guys have heard them too. Which ones do you agree with? Which ones do you disagree with? What isn't being talked about that should be? What do we need to change to start winning? Because 2026 is coming soon. You pass petitions for the 2026 elections in 4 bleeping months. So what do we need to change here to start to win?
Before Aaron jumps in with his 6-minute rant.
Hannah, go ahead.
You. So yeah, I was thinking about this, and I'm just going to use West Chicago for this. So the reason why Dan Bovee won in West Chicago is he had something going for him from the beginning. He had a code violation with his house. The city fined him like 20 grand. And then all these yard signs started popping up in West Chicago called Save the Greenhouse. And then he became known as the Greenhouse Guy. And then he took that and he created a movement called We Go for the People that really highlighted transparency. And it was quite literally a nonpartisan group. And I know that because my very liberal neighbors and my very, very Trump neighbors both had his signs in their yards. Okay. So he took all of this momentum of these groups he had built, and they had seen him in action. Like they knew he was a man of action. And so when he ran for office, it was like, yeah, we know Dan. Like we know what he's about. We've seen him in action. He's already served us. He's already helped us with housing code violations and whatever. And so just the idea of building relationships through coalitions, I think is probably the biggest thing. People in general, how they can serve their community, I'll just say that. But since we're talking about winning elections, is probably the greatest way we can win elections. I would, if, should I ever run again, I will spend way more of my time building coalitions and serving people in that way than, knocking doors and making phone calls. So yeah, those are my 2 cents.
I'm glad you started, Hannah. I mean, we teach a class on this, and we say the number one way to win in difficult to win districts. This is how Reagan won in '80. Is coalitions. There's a whole book about it that I always recommend called The Strategy of Campaigning, where Reagan learned that lesson. That's if you don't build coalitions, you will not win if you're outside the mainstream of what voters expect. And so I always say, if we're going to recruit candidates, I don't look at ideology. And I know people give me crap for that. But I want to know, do they have ties to their community? Because if the Republican Party says, here are our foundational principles, then the candidate who knows their community, like St. Charles or Palatine or Tinley Park or Carbondale, or Collinsville, or wherever it might be. Those candidates who know their local community can translate this high-level platform into what this means for you as my neighbor in St. Charles, as my neighbor in Palatine or Collinsville. I want to find people who are actually connected in their local communities, because then they can have real human interactions with voters, translating policy into what it means for you, my neighbor. And so, Hannah, I'm so glad you spoke first, because that's a huge key. We absolutely have to get better at that if we're going to win.
Well, I also think, especially in these municipal elections, as Republicans, we can't be shy, and you have to be aggressive, but in a strategic way. And there are voters out there that we need to be talking to about our municipal candidates, and the Democrats don't even have to know about it. Just talk to the Republicans. This is who you need to vote for. This is why. They share when you go to vote, it's going to say independent on the ballot, but these are the candidates that share our values. And we also have to be creative. One of the things that we did in Mississippi Valley Library District, there's a significant pocket, a couple of precincts where it's a significant Hispanic population. So we did a mailer that was bilingual to those precincts, English on one side, Spanish on the other. And in those precincts, our results were the same as they were in the rest of the district, right? The candidates that won also won those precincts. And I think that bilingual mailer made a difference.
Nice.
I think
you guys all jumped on each other at first, and now you're all being passive. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I think the biggest thing the Republican Party can do is to build up actual local infrastructure and build up a precinct committeeman or precinct captain, team that is going to knock on the doors and build up a database of voters and actually engage with your voters and actually make them politically informed enough to show up in local elections. It's the same thing for 2026 as well. Inform your voters, build up an organization. And it's also about being visible. Being normal makes such a difference, because people, even partisan voters, don't want to think about their mayor as, they want a conservative as their mayor, but they don't want like a firebrand. Usually, they want a mayor who speaks to the issues and who gets things done. That's what makes local elected officials effective, and that's how you win elections. It's about speaking to the issue of your community from a conservative perspective, but not always from a partisan perspective. That's how you win elections.
Well, a good example of that is Mark Kounick up in Cary, Illinois. At Mark, when he ran his first re-election, he was somebody who, this is what we all love about Mark. He puts his head down and just does what he knows to be right. He puts the hard work in, doesn't ever look for credit. He embodies that Reagan principle of, you can get real things done. I don't remember the exact quote, but I'll paraphrase. You can get things done if you're not somebody who chases the credit. Mark embodies that. His first re-election, he had opponents who were badgering him for 4 years leading up to that first re-election. We ran that race. It was a massive fight. He barely won. Ever since then, though, the people of Cary have recognized that, he does a dang good job, and he really cares about Cary and gets things done for them. His latest re-election, he blew away his opposition. And didn't run much of a campaign. And I love the guy, but he didn't do as much as we did 4 years ago. I mean, he didn't need to. He won overwhelmingly. You do a good job. You focus on taking care of the people in your community. You show what real leadership looks like. Oftentimes, the voters will reward you for that. But if you get hyper partisan, you get involved with some of those problems. At the local level, it doesn't tend to play super well. I mean, Chris, I don't know when you're gonna say your line there, but I know for Orland Park, you wanted to say a certain line. Go for it. Right now's your time, man.
Never tell 10% of the population of your town to go back to their country.
I mean, it's just
Right.
you got to be smart about your politics, and if you're not able to connect with the people of your community, if you actively create enemies every other day, eventually that enemy list is going to grow so large that you can't win re-election.
I think one thing that everybody's missing here, though, and these are all been great points. The first issue that I think that people need to understand in politics, government, whatever the case may be, is that it's not about us. It's not about the people that are on the screen. It's about them. And a lot of these candidates are like, it's about, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to do that. It is about what you're going to do for the people that you want to get voted. You talked about how do we win in Illinois, right? And everybody talks about, well, the rhinos and the grassroots need to get together and the establishment and all that. That all garbage has, on some level has to happen, but we as candidates, we as elected officials have to start telling people what we're doing for them and why they're important and why the issues are for them. And this is why it's going to affect them. And that is it. And that is how we sell it. And I think if you do that, if you look at what Donald Trump, like him or don't like him, his message is like, this is what I'm going to do because this is what I care about you. And that message went over and over and over again. And that's where you beat Kamala Harris up on everything, on their messaging. And that's what whoever runs statewide, state rep, state senate, governor, whatever the case may be, they have to make the campaign about the people and not about themselves. And you have to have strong leaders, people that are like, look, man, I know this is going to hurt. Like, I'm about to get punched in the face, but I'm going to do it anyways because it's better for my people, right? And when you have people that are all self-serving and worried about themselves and what is it going to be like, no, let's go do what is the best on there, and that will lead to success and to wins. And you take a little bit of risk, and then you mix that with competent people that perform at a high level, that know about strategy, that know about campaigning, that know about scale and repetition in business, and know how to run elections. And then you can get really good people to get involved and get people excited and energized. That is what Donald Trump did better than everybody else. And that whoever our leadership is going to have to be has to be the top of the scale. How do you get people engaged and energized, and why do they care?
Yeah,
make it about them.
Aaron, I love what you talked about, which is a huge thing that candidates need to learn, which is a phrase I always use in our trainings. They're the hero. The voters, they're the hero of their own story. They don't care about you. They're the hero of their story, not you. You don't matter. And so too many of these candidates, here's my history and here's what I've done and here's my bio. We teach this in our trainings. You don't matter. It's what are you going to do to make the lives of the people you're looking to represent better. That's it. That's all that matters. And the second thing that I want to say is two of the highest profile Republican losses or center-right losses by mayors in the state. I saved a bunch of their digital ads, their mailings, their language. A lot of it was, this is what I did. Over the last 4 or 8 years, here's what I did. The problem is, and I've been screaming about this for the longest time, voters don't vote for what you did. They're going to vote for what you will do. What you did is why they voted for you last time. I gave you my vote 4 years ago. So telling me all the things you did because of the vote I gave you last time, I don't care. What are you going to do for my vote this time? How are you going to make my life better over the next 4 years because I give you my vote? Too many of these candidates were so hyper-focused on, here's my record, and never about, here's what you will get if you vote for me. And I think that contributed largely to their losses.
You better believe it.
What else we need to do better? What do you guys got? Let's talk about this. Michael, I'm going to put you on the spot here because you have shared this a couple times, both in public events and in our podcast. You've talked about Trump's numbers in 2020 and 24 versus Pritzker's numbers in 2022. And I'll give you credit. You use that as a way to motivate Republicans. We can do this. We can win. And so I'm appreciative of that. However, I am seeing that now used with the wrong message. We see Jeannie Ives going on Prof Show saying, we need a Trumpian candidate for governor if we're going to win. We see Tom DeVore saying that the Republicans failed to realize that we have 80 million Trump supporters. They're not Republican supporters. It's all about Trump. We had Andrew Chesney, who's been on this podcast a few times, put out a message. which 90% of it was a great message. I agreed with it. But the part I didn't agree with it was him saying Republicans got crushed in the Chicago suburbs again. I'm paraphrasing, because they ran away from Trump's populism and instead they should embrace it. Here's the problem with that. Yes, Trump significantly improved his numbers in Illinois, and that's a really positive sign for us. But he still lost by 9. Donald Trump could move to Illinois, run for governor, and he would lose by 9 points. That's what that tells you. And so saying we need a Trumpian candidate, we just need to embrace Trump. There are districts where that works. In Michael's region, in Will County, in the exurbs, there are absolutely places in this ridiculously diverse state where that works super well. But there are a lot of places where it doesn't. Let's just talk. Chesney is a member of the Illinois Senate. So let's just talk about the Senate. There are 4 districts that Republicans are nervous about that they're going to be defending in 2026. I'm going to give you the Trump performance in each of those districts. Senate District 24, Seth Lewis, Trump lost it by 8. Senate District 26, Dan McConkey, Trump lost it by 10. Don DeWitt in 33, Trump lost it by 6. 41, Curran, Trump lost it by 11. That's a D2 district. In many of those districts, Trump underperformed other Republicans on the ballot. 24 is an R1 district, yet Trump lost it by 8. 26 is an R2 district. Trump lost it by 10. 33, R2. 41, D2. Trump lost it by 11. In all these races, Trump underperformed by 8 to 10 to 12 points. And so by just saying we just need to embrace Trump in these races is a really dumb thing to say. This is a super diverse state. It's a massive state. Central Illinois doesn't look like Southern or Western or Northern Illinois. We are a diverse state. What works in Andrew Chesney's district, which is an R24 district, doesn't necessarily work in the suburbs of Chicago. And so we've got to be willing to be strategic, as we started this episode talking about, that Trump plays great for us, maybe in Erica Harris's district, which is a district we need to hold, and Trump won that district by 3 points. Awesome. We don't have to be as strategic in that district. Trump doesn't kill us there. But in some of these key races, in some of these key districts, 36 and 48 are our 2 that we want to pick up. Trump lost both of those districts. This idea that we just need a Trump candidate to win Illinois has been disproven by the data. Even Donald Trump hasn't won in some of these districts. So stop with this one-size-fits-all approach. In some districts, we need a Trumpian candidate, and in some districts, we don't. We've got to be smarter and more strategic. And that's one of the narratives I've seen come out of this election, that if we just become more like Trump, if we just become more pure ideologically, we're going to win every race. And guess what? The data doesn't back that up.
You know, Collin, one of the arguments that I'd make to you there, and I get what you're saying about Trump, the human being and the individual, but, you know, I'm a big movie buff. And if anybody ever likes to watch political movies, I think a cool movie was The American President. And there was a great line that was said by Louis Rothschild in the movie. And he said, "Mr. President, the people want leadership. They're so thirsty for it, they'll crawl through the desert towards a mirage. And when they discover there's no water, they'll drink the sand." What I think people are looking for across Illinois is strong leadership that's not going to get back down, that's going to continue to push back. The Trump personality without the Trump person is what they want. They want somebody that's going to stand up, that's going to call people out for their actions, that is going to be strong, have the intestinal fortitude to be a leader and to say what's right. And I think that is what they're looking for. They're looking for that aspect of it. And I think that's why we think we can be successful in 2026, because J.B. Pritzker is not speaking for the people. He's not speaking for that group. We can have that voice, but we need to have somebody that's willing to take all the arrows and the rocks and the shots in order to do it. And that is hard to find.
Well, and I want to make sure I'm balanced here, because Chesney, he's been on our podcast. I've given him kudos. I think he's been my OG of the week in the past. I don't dislike the guy. The rest of his post was really good. And to your point, Aaron, it aligned with what you said. So let me give him credit and read the rest of his post. Voters want bold leadership, not watered down moderation. An America First working class message, like securing the border, bringing back American jobs, standing up to the political establishment. That's what wins. Playing perpetual defense doesn't. I paraphrased a little bit, but the rest of his post was awesome. This is just where we tend to get off the rails here. 70% of what we're saying is correct, but the other 30% isn't. And we're not going to win by running a Trump-like candidate statewide in Illinois. Maybe somebody who is a bold leader, sure. But Trump didn't win Illinois. So that's not the calling card here for how you win this state.
Well, I think.
Go ahead, Butler.
I was going first. Chris, you can go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All right. I was just gonna say, okay, obviously there's 2.6 million people in this state, or around 2.4 or something, like
Right?
2.4, right?
It's
2.4
12
that
million.
voted for
12 million.
Trump.
Oh, who voted for Trump? Okay.
There's 2.4 million people that voted for Trump. There's 2.1 million that voted to reelect Pritzker, right? There's 600.
But they voted for Trump. Michael, this is the point. Like I know you use this to rally Republicans, and I'm not asking you to stop. But here, we got to be intellectually honest. Those 2.4 million voted for Trump. We just learned on Tuesday, if we didn't already know, that they're not coming out for anybody else. And so this
That's what I'm.
BS that all we have to do is get them to come out and we'll win is it's BS. It's
Let
been
Butler
proven
finish his point,
untrue
Colin.
over and over and over and over. And I think it's intellectually lazy because all you're going to say is, if we just get them out, we'll win. It never happened before and it never will happen because they only
Butler didn't
care
get
about
to finish his
presidential
point.
races.
Yeah,
Butler
that's
didn't
why
get
I
to
think
finish.
you have to. There's two things that you have to do here at the same time, right? There's a group of people out there that vote straight Republican in a presidential election, but they do not show up in a midterm, right? So identify those people and convince them that, hey, you need to show up and vote. At the same time, you've also got to identify the people that are persuadable, that you can convince them to vote for Republican, maybe for 2 or 3 offices, but not everything. Let's identify those and persuade them. So there's the ones you have to convince to vote Republican, and there's the ones you have to convince to vote, period.
Yeah, I mean, that's affinity versus propensity. You're not wrong. But my point is that there are people who are hiding under the skirt of this message that Trump got 2.4 million, JB Pritzker only got 2.2. If we just have a Trump candidate, it's over, we win. And it's my point is you are playing with numbers. Presidential years versus non-presidential years. You are lying to people and it's intellectually dishonest. The reality is Trump lost by 9%. Percent is what matters here. You can't use numbers and use fake math and just try to make yourself some money, which some of these grifters are. Let's be real with people. The reality is that Trump lost by 9. That was an improvement. That was absolutely a great sign for Republicans. But if you think you're just going to run a Donald Trump candidate and that's going to win in the state, it's not going to happen. Now, the other side is also not true. Chris is gonna respond to this. Pat Brady is wrong that we just need a moderate candidate and the conservatives are the problem. I also don't agree with that side. I think he is absolutely wrong on that. So there are two sides to this, and they're both wrong, which we're going to talk about in 2 weeks. But I think we need to be honest. We have had too many years of losing in the state. Let's stop saying what's convenient and makes us feel good, and let's look at the real data and make some real, actual strategic decisions. Because if all we want to do is pat each other on the back, pat each other on the ass and say, oh, you're pretty, it's okay, you didn't lose, you're fine, it's okay, little boy, then I'm not interested in being part of this party anymore in this state. If you're interested in winning, let's look at data and let's actually make some smart strategic decisions and go frickin' win.
I'm glad Colin is coming on board with my idea that this podcast become a Democratic podcast and reflect our viewership. In any case, there is some truth to all this Trump number nonsense. But the one bit of truth there is that if you're a Republican candidate for governor or statewide office, you got to bite the Trump bullet. Okay, Colin has talked about this, and he's 100% right. They're going to call you a Trump supporter anyway. They're going to tell you every which way they can to the orange man in the White House, okay? So you might as well just say, yeah, you know what? I voted for Donald Trump. I think he does some good things. Just get it over with. Hell, it may be imperative that you get a good candidate to be endorsed by Donald Trump in a primary, get them through a primary, and then go hard in a general election with a real campaign infrastructure. But here's the thing, everyone. It is impossible. Absolutely impossible. And if you can do it again, you are smarter than me. You are smarter than every other political operative in the entire country or in human history. It is impossible to turn out every single person who voted for Donald Trump and tell them to vote straight Republican ticket. That is impossible. It cannot be done. But what can be done? What can be done is you can identify Republican voters who might be hard Republicans and they show up in the primaries, but they don't always show up in municipals, or maybe they always show up in generals, but they might not show up in midterms. And you can identify them. You can work the doors and you can say, hey guys, remember to vote this election, and you will not get every one of them out. In the game of turnout, you will never get all of them out. Nobody ever has in the history of politics, except maybe during the days of the Chicago Machine where they got like 110% of them to come out, but we don't talk about that. But you can do things on the margins. And while you do that, you can run a serious, persuadable campaign that appeals to suburbanites, that appeals to moderates, but also gets your conservative base out. That's how Glenn Youngkin won in Virginia in 2021. It's been the model ever since then. And I'm giving people who aren't that smart credit, but that's what happened. They were able to convince moderates and suburbanites that they were supposed to vote Republican, and they convinced rural conservatives that they need to show up in similar numbers they did for Trump. If you do that, you can win in this state. But if you focus too much on one thing, and that's like, we're just going to get the Trumpies out to vote, it's not going to work. And if you're a stupid Pat Brady abortionist and you say that we just need people who support abortion up through the 9th month of pregnancy and the Republican Party's viable in the state again, well, I got news for you. You're living in the past, and good luck getting through a primary.
Especially considering our latest poll showed 4% of Illinoisans actually care about that issue as their top issue. So you're not wrong, Chris. Let's close this out. Aaron, I know you want to jump in. Let me just.
Well, I wanted just to say to Chris, you know what I mean? So, Chris, what you're telling me is that we need to get probably a suburban Cook County candidate who was a 3-time Trump delegate that has a conservative, bold record of speaking out against all these different issues, that looks like a Democrat but thinks like a Republican. Maybe that would be the best choice for governor of Illinois. Is that what you're saying?
Is John Morrison putting his name out there? What are you talking about?
That's right.
All right, let's move along here before any of us get ourselves in trouble. Let's go to our last topic. We've talked negatively about what needs to be done, what the challenges are, why we lost. I want to end here because too little of this is done. Why is there hope? Why is there hope for Republicans? I'll let you guys all go first, and I'll fill in the gaps of what might have been missed, because I truly believe there is hope. You know, I gave Finkston some beef this last weekend and last week just because he had a more of a negative piece, and he didn't call me because he knows I tend to be a little bit more of a realist, which includes some optimism with all of his pessimism. Though to give him credit, he and I were on the radio together on his radio show this morning, and he let me be a bit optimistic. So thank you for that, Patrick. But there is hope. For all the doom and gloom, there is absolutely hope here for Republicans. What are the signs you see? Why is there hope? And if we do X better, what is that thing that's going to lead us to more victories here in 2026? What do you guys see?
I think we should let Hannah go first because she hasn't had a lot of opportunity to speak today.
Aaron just feels bad that he cut her off before.
Wow, so gracious. Really want my vote, I see. Hopeful. So I think why Republicans can be hopeful is because it's in our power to change things still. I know there's a lot of methods, there's mailers, all of that. I really don't put my faith into that as much as I do in just building relationships. I would even say building relationships is even more important than messaging, Collin. And I know you want to kick me out of this Zoom call just for saying that, but
just for the record, you're 100% right. Relationships are the number one thing when it comes to politics.
So, you know, and I'm not virtue signaling when I say this, like I'm speaking to myself, like the best thing we can do right now, it's not campaign season. Maybe for one of us, it's campaign season, but for the rest of us, it's not, is we can go into our communities like normal people and just serve the hell out of them. Really, like go find the marginalized, serve them, and be the type of person where your neighbor comes up to you and says, man, I wish you would run for office. And then consider running for office. But at the end of the day, the whole reason we run for office is to make the world a better place. It just so happens we can do that by winning elections, but it doesn't have to be the only way. So I'm hopeful because every person has the ability to go and serve their community. And I think that's the best pathway to victory for all of us.
Hannah, to this day, the candidate we work with, who is probably our top 5 favorite candidates of all the over 1,000 now that we've worked with, ran for office as a super successful person, didn't succeed, and said, you know what? I don't need your permission to serve my country, and went and joined the military. And I already respected them before that, but I was like, holy cow, I don't know I could respect somebody more. That they said just what you said, that, you know what, prove that you're worthy of leadership. Go out there and serve. Go out there and lead. And then, you know what, maybe then run for office. I think that's awesome advice. Yet again, I'm glad you went first. Well done.
If there's
Well, I
any
think
hope,
we have some hope. I mean, in my region, we made some inroads in some communities that historically have been tough for us. I mean, winning the village of Caseyville, winning mayor and three of the trustees. That's been a very competitive area for us, like at the county board level, state rep, state senate. So I was really excited to have a decisive victory there. And now that's just like the beginning, right? Like now we got to make sure that these elected officials, get the job done and are good representatives of their community. That way we can build on that. And maybe in 2026, we'll flip that county board seat that we lost by 12 votes in 2022, right? Or Katie Stewart, it's going to be a big help in that district as well. So, get in there and get the job done.
Yeah, spineless Katie Stewart, who can't even vote on her home damn bills. I certainly would love to take her out.
If there's any hope for the Republican Party in the state of Illinois, it's that the Democratic Party is also run by idiots. The Democratic Party doesn't do anything particularly exceptionally well. Sure, they have money, but a lot of that's Pritzker's and a lot of that's labor. And labor really only goes to the Democratic Party because Republicans keep giving them the middle finger in the state. That's changing over time, and I'm glad to see that, but that's still the case for many Republicans in the state. But really, the hope for the Republican Party is that the Democratic Party isn't really doing a good job. I don't think J.B. Pritzker is a particularly popular governor, but I think a lot of people have been forced or perhaps persuaded to vote for him because the Republican Party isn't actually offering them anything that they want, isn't actually offering them a message they can get behind, isn't actually motivating them to seek change in their state. If the Republican Party wants any chance, it's going to recognize the faults that it has and come to terms with them and actually seek a middle ground and compromise. And by compromise, I mean internal. I'm not saying compromise on principle. But I'm saying come together as a party and actually establish an infrastructure and run campaigns that can actually be successful. The Democratic Party is scotch taping campaigns together and winning because the Republican Party is over there playing in the sandbox, eating the sand. Okay? So if the Republican Party could ever get its act together, it would be viable. And let me always remind the viewers of this podcast, the Democratic Party is terrified of the Republican Party. It is. The Democratic Party in the state of Illinois is terrified that one day everything will click for the Republican Party and they will take over everything. This is why the Democratic Party outspends Republicans in some of these state rep districts 20-1. It isn't because they want to run up a margin. It's because they're genuinely terrified that Ken Griffin will get on a plane back to Illinois and some genius political operative, will wonder who that could be put in charge of the operation, and then the Democrats would start losing. That is the hope for the Republican Party. It's not a lot. It's a fact that there is hope, but everybody needs to get their act together and start working as a team and actually developing messaging and developing campaign infrastructure that can be successful. Until then, there is no hope.
Chris, you're going to hate this, but I hope I actually agree with it. On Fingston's radio show this morning, I talked about how this is basically like the White Sox in the AL Central. Republicans in Illinois are the White Sox. We can't get it right. We barely even know how to put a team on the field. We keep losing. It's kind of pathetic. But the good news is we play in the AL Central, which is it doesn't take that much improvement to start to actually win and maybe even get close to making the playoffs. The reality is in Illinois that Democrats, the other states that we get to work in, the Democrats in Illinois would get demolished by the Republicans and Democrats in these other states. They are awful in this state. It just so happens that Republicans are even more awful. And that's the good news for us, is if we just get our act together just even a little bit, we don't have to be that much better to start to see huge gains in the state, because Democrats in the state, even these huge statewide efforts and these local elections, they've only been doing it the last couple cycles. And it's only because of Pritzker and his money, which, by the way, is going to go away at some point very soon. And so this idea here that we have to be, I'd love to see us get great. But right now we're awful. We just got to get a little bit better into the bad territory, and we're going to start to win races. And that's the good news, is we play in the AL Central. It ain't going to take a heck of a lot to make the playoffs out of this division.
The only extra comment I'll add to that is the White Sox starting pitching has looked great lately, and I would trust the White Sox starting pitching over the Illinois Republican Party starting pitching.
No, fair. What else you guys got? What other optimism do you guys have?
Well, yeah, I don't know if this is optimism, but we will have a future. Someday this state is going to have to truly be saved. We're not quite there, and I don't know too many Democrats capable of saving it. So, I do know with social media and different things, people are getting more and more fed up. You see it a little more each year, and eventually people are going to boil over. And when you're sitting on $140 billion of pension debt and everything else bad we got going on, there will be a day of reckoning, and there will be people looking for new leadership. So,
Well, especially as Democrats in the state get more and more far left progressive, you're seeing that they're leaving the average voter, where the average voter goes, "Sheesh, I don't agree with that." So I think your point is a really solid one, Brad, which is that the Democrats in this state, as they get way and way further left, as you see the economic policies of Democrats fail miserably, which we talk about on a weekly basis, that creates opportunity for Republicans. Now we actually have to take advantage of the opportunity, but it does create opportunity. And as we look to 2026, how far left progressive the Democrats are in this state, a good communicator who can point that out will show the voters just how crazy and nuts Democrats are here in Illinois. And they're going to realize that actually Republicans happen to be in the mainstream in this state. So you're right. It does create an opportunity. Now the question will be, will we take advantage? But you're right on that, Brad. What else we got, guys? Come on, some more positivity here.
No, here's what I'll tell you positively. I've been doing a lot of the circuits of Lincoln Day dinners and all the different events that we've had in different campaigns and such. And I've been talking a lot of internally with other people that are looking at what we're going to do in 26. And why this might have been a little bit of a stumble for a lot of us across the state, especially in the collar counties. I think there is a feeling of grace, really a level of grace that's going to be out there to be given to a lot of these other candidates. It opens up a lot of other opportunities for some of these other candidates that have learned from the losses that we got on Tuesday to be able to perform better and to learn from those mistakes and give us, this feeling of, hey, now the Republicans have gotten a taste of what could happen in 26 if we don't get our act together. And I think, everybody had a little bit of a pity party on Wednesday, right? And kind of licked their wounds. I could tell you today, I started talking to a lot of people across the state. They're like, we've gotten the wake up call. We are ready to start getting excited. We are ready to get invigorated. We're ready to start putting our teams together. We took it for granted that we're in Republican-leaning districts and we just got walloped by Democrats. Now we know what we need to do, and we're going to go out there and get it done. And that enthusiasm is something that really excites me and makes me want to just like, yes, let's go do this, right? We had our challenges on Tuesday, but now it's to kind of be facing forward and start looking for who are going to be the leaders, who's going to be the team to take us through into 26 at every different part of the level, from state rep to state senate to Congress to, statewide elections. And I think that as we start having more of those discussions, as we kind of finalize on who our candidates are going to be, I think we got rocked so bad that a lot of the infighting that we normally have between the establishment and the grassroots is going to be put to the wayside, and that we're going to get united because we understand that if we don't, it's going to be just total demolition, and it's, mutually assured destruction on both sides. And so a lot of the things that I'm starting to see on social media too are really positive. And I think we just need to capitalize off that, and we need to coalesce, and we have to go out and find those strong candidates, those bold voices, so we can be successful in 26 and show them what's up.
Yeah, well, Chris hates when I do this, but I got to tell you, when we broke down the data from the progressive tax race, and we saw in all these districts just how well we did as the vote no on progressive tax, it shows the ceiling. It shows the opportunity. And we saw it again on Tuesday. You saw that even though the voters overwhelmingly voted for Democrats and liberals and progressives, in most of these communities, they voted down tax hike referendums. Kane County is a great example of this. My buddy John, who's been on the podcast, pointed out that in Kane County, the sales tax referendum was defeated soundly, while at the same time, Democrats pretty much swept almost all the elections throughout the county. That tells you that, yes, our brand has some struggles, but in this state, voters are recognizing the fact that you can't afford to live in the state, that cost of living is too high, that taxes are too high. And I think that shows that while we're performing here, there's a ceiling that's significantly higher. Whether you look at the progressive tax data, which the House Republicans did this week, where they showed the number of districts where the progressive tax campaign on the vote no side did really well, including a ton. I think it was 26 Democratic districts where the progressive tax failed miserably. That tells you there's a ceiling here. Now, we have a lot of work to get to that ceiling, but you saw even Tuesday that even these voters who vote far left are still rejecting some of those economic policies, those pocketbook policies by the Democrats. And that's something that I think creates opportunity for us.
Well,
Well, I
I
think the
could,
reason for that, real quick, is because they don't trust the government. Even if they vote Democratic a lot, they don't trust them with the purse strings. So that is something that we as Republicans should be keying off on. One of the sad things that happened, but it was also a good thing, is we got rid of Mike Madigan, but we also got rid of our boogeyman. So we need to, as a group, start identifying the something that can put us all together. And nothing brings anyone together like a common enemy. And if we can do those couple of things and start getting people excited and give them more hope that we can actually win, I think that's when you start seeing fundraising increase. That's when I start seeing volunteers, precinct committee increase, all those things. Sorry to cut you off, Fred.
you're fine. I was just going to follow up on the tax increase part. There's not a single sales tax increase that I saw anywhere that passed, and most of them got defeated soundly. And the education tax that used to be a very popular tax, usually that passed. I haven't seen that pass in a couple cycles now, and that I think that just goes to show the voters are starting to get fed up with that stuff. They're paying attention. Used to those things would pass and nobody would even pay attention to it. Since they're failing at the margins they are, it just shows that people are ready for change. It's just a matter of us messaging the rest of it correctly.
All right, let me close this out with this. I said this on Thinkston podcast. Here's the last bit of good news. I said that the only thing less popular than rush hour traffic and a plate of uncooked vegetables is both political parties. Every poll we've seen over and over, Republicans and Democrats are ridiculously unpopular. That's obviously bad news that we Republicans are unpopular, but it's great news to know that our opponents are also super unpopular. We got work to do, but the good news is we are not going into the ring going up against Macho Man Randy Savage or Andre the Giant. We are going up against some pretty weak opposition who is disliked by the average voter. And so if we can get out there and do our jobs, a marginal improvement is going to start to see really good gains at the polls. And that's what I want to see. The goal here is 2030. We got to get out of the superminority in the House and Senate and have the governor's mansion by 2030. That means we got to start winning some key races here in 2026. I'm not looking for us to go to a red state in 2026, but we got to pick up a couple House seats, keep our Senate seats and pick up one or two, and maybe even take the governor's mansion. We got to start to make tangible progress by 2030 so we at least have a 50% chance of drawing the maps for the next decade. And so we've got to start to make some progress. All right, we're going to go to our last couple segments here. We'll be quick about these. As always, we have our News You Can Use segment. This is a handful of topics about things you need to be aware of as our viewers, as our listeners, things you should let the public know about, you should use on social media, put in a fundraising email or a fundraising text, ways to contrast ourselves with the Democrats who are in charge. Let's give you a few of those from just the last week. It came out this week. There was a study done by the Consumer Federation of America. The states with the greatest increase in their home insurance premiums were number 1, Utah at 59%, number 2, Illinois at 50%. We had the second highest increase in our home insurance premiums over the last 3 years. That is a part of the cost of living equation. There are lots of things that fit under that umbrella, but that's what Republicans need to realize is that the voters in the state aren't just angry about taxes or property taxes. It's the whole kit and caboodle. It's the cost of living in this state. And here's yet another example of under Democratic leadership in Illinois, yet another thing that you pay for, your home insurance premiums, has gone up 50% in just the last 3 years, the second highest in the whole country. Anybody have any quick thoughts on that? Hearing nothing, I'll go to the next one. So I will give Rich Miller kudos of Cat Facts. Over the last week and a half, he has posted 3 or 4 different things about the job situation in Illinois and done so with a honest opinion about the fact that we are not creating jobs in the state. We've covered it a few times on these podcasts over the last couple of weeks, so I won't badger this too much. However, you saw the latest IDES numbers come out for January and February, and we found that we have lost in Illinois 11,000 jobs, January and February. We don't know the March numbers yet. We'll talk about that when they come out. But yet again, we see that the numbers are getting worse in this state. We are losing jobs. I think Rich compared our numbers from February to February of last year and saw that we had only increased by 0.3% over the course of a year. And Every other state, whether it's our surrounding states in the Midwest or states like Texas and Florida and others that are growing gangbusters, have all grown jobs significantly more. Yet here in Illinois, we are losing jobs, 11,000 jobs in just the last 2 months. Of course, you have a quote from Andy Minar and all the other Democrats. These are great numbers. We're doing so good. Pritzker has done the long con here when it comes to the public and somehow convincing the public that he's done a good job with economic development, despite the fact that every single data point proves that, as a matter of fact, Pritzker has an abysmal record when it comes to jobs, employment, and opportunity in this state. Any thoughts on that one? I mean, come on, Aaron. You want to run against the guy? Here's your chance.
Well, no, I mean you're speaking to the same things that we already know. I mean, you got an absentee governor that's here that's looking to run for president. He probably didn't really want to be governor, but he knew that was a stepping stone. He's bored sitting in his old mansion, and he wants to do something because he's tired of going to all those different houses all over the United States. This is the time that we have as Republicans to kind of unite together, and these are the topics that we need to talk about. Making Illinois affordable again. We need to take an Illinois first perspective on this, right? Make it Illinois first in job growth, make it Illinois first in education, make it Illinois first in protecting our borders so businesses don't leave to go to Indiana, Ohio, and all the other different states that are taking our businesses away in our tax base. These are examples of why we need to get activated and engaged. The challenge that we have is they're not exciting. So we need to break them down so people can consume these issues and ideas and understand how they're, going to affect their lives individually. With the insurance thing going back a minute, right? Illinois is one of the biggest hubs for insurance. Most people don't realize that unless you live down in that Peoria, Bloomington area where we have Country Financial Insurance is there. You have State Farm that's there. You have Farmers Insurance. That's a big hub for Illinois. And when you see that those 50% hikes are going up, that is a tax base for us. When people start leaving those firms and start going to other places, that is revenue that is, again, leaving our state, even if the company stays here. These are issues that we can break down to. And these are also issues that we can bring other groups on that aren't particularly Republican groups that can be added onto it. Working with union groups, working with labor groups, they have similar issues. And I think that's a great opportunity for us if we can get our messaging correct to try to bring more people onto our bandwagon to see why that we need a change at the top.
Yep, I agree. All right, let's go to the next one here. So speaking of gaslighting voters, which is Lou Sandoval, the Chamber of Commerce leader, used this term about Pritzker, and it was so right. Here's another place that Pritzker and Mendoza and the Democrats have gaslighted voters. They've talked about how we've increased our rainy day fund and we've been so responsible. But here's the reality. The reality is that based on the latest data from Pew, Illinois is last among all 50 states and our ability to withstand a financial crisis. This is talking about our rainy day fund, the amount of funding we have just in the bank account. They looked at a number of factors to identify which states had the ability to withstand a crisis. Illinois is number 50 out of 50. And they like to tell you, and the media parrots this, that look, we're investing in our rainy day fund and no one has done this before. And all that's true. But this is just like our credit rating where look, it's going up, but we're still last. Everybody's going up and we're going up less. This is yet another situation where they've focused on just this minute portion of data to say, look, it's gone up. Look at this tiny little subset. The numbers have gone up and nobody is willing to take an objective viewpoint and say, wait a second, let's look at all the data. Wait a second, Illinois is actually doing really, really, really badly. Yet another factor here where Illinois is struggling financially, is struggling with our budget because we spend almost every penny we get our hands on. We have no ability to withstand a recession. And so while Pritzker goes out there and says that Trump is ruining our economy, it's going to lead to a recession, well, guess what? Pritzker has done nothing to prepare Illinois to be able to be ready for that recession. We have enough money in the bank to make it through less than 30 days, the worst in the entire nation. And so if Pritzker's right that Trump is indeed bad for the economy, then why the hell isn't Pritzker getting Illinois ready for a potential recession? That is the problem with Pritzker as the leader of the state and the Democrats as the leaders of the state. They have not put Illinois in a position to succeed no matter what happens in the future.
Well, it's hard to get us ready for a financial crisis when we're already in one, Collin. You know what I mean? What do they say about people that are in holes? Stop digging. And right. So there's no way we could be prepared for that. We're already suffering from all those effects.
No, we keep digging ourselves deeper. You're right.
I loved this headline so much. Like I was thinking through if something bad really happened, like what we would do. And I just imagine like Pritzker, like Venmo requesting Indiana and be like, can you cover us this time? I don't know how it all works, but I think Venmo would be.
That's awesome.
Well done. I like it. All right, last one here is not bad news, but good news, but it's something we like to sometimes equip you with when it comes to messaging. Lane's going to bring this up on screen, but their latest research, done by a number of sources, including Pew, shows if you look at lower income, middle income, and upper income, starting from 1970 to now, you're going to see this on screen. If you're on Spotify or if you're one of our panelists, you're not going to see it, sadly. But here's the reality. Since 1970, the percentage of Americans who were considered lower income has gone down from 10% to 8%. And here's the thing that all the left-wing MSNBC pundits want you to know, that the percentage of people who are middle income have gone down drastically. 19%. They've gone down from 62% down to 43. But what you're seeing on screen is the benefit of that. The percentage of Americans who are upper income has gone from 29 up to 48. So the next time you hear some left-wing pundit say the middle class is being demolished, we're losing the middle class, the reality is, especially compared to the rest of the world, Americans are becoming wealthier and wealthier. What we consider middle class in 1970, which was barely having enough to get by, having a small house, maybe you've got a black and white TV, you've got very little to your name. Nowadays, somebody who's middle class has a nice car, 3 or 4 TVs, nice phones. That's what we consider middle class in this country, and that's a good thing. We have increased wealth for every American, and that's a good thing. And I'm sick and tired of us letting the left control the narrative when it comes to economic issues. Capitalism, the free market, has raised more people out of poverty, and as we see here, has upward mobility, moving people from middle income to upper income greater than any other economic system in the history of mankind. And I'm sick and tired of us being afraid to actually promote that fact because we're always so defensive. Go on the attack. We care about poor people. We care about working families. And guess what? Since Ronald Reagan, you see those numbers really started to jump in 1979. Since Ronald Reagan in 1980, it's Republicans and free market policies that have moved people up in their income bracket and given them a better life. Stop being afraid to point that out, please.
Yeah, in a country that doesn't produce anything, I'm sure not worried about this entire bubble bursting one day and the entire materialism of the American economy just come crashing down one day, Collin. This isn't a big issue at all. And not having a middle class anymore, that's a great thing, right, guys? Please don't look behind the curtain. Please don't look at the underlying numbers. Everything's fine, guys.
Yeah, it's so horrible that we've helped middle class families become upper income families. God forbid we actually help people grow their wealth and actually have additional benefits and opportunities in the future. We are so horrible, Chris, for doing that. All right, let's move to our final segment here, our OG and Clown of the Week. This is where anybody can nominate anybody they'd like for praise or scorn in the latest week in politics. Brad, I want to let you go first if you have anybody, just because I know you've got a hard stop time. So with respect for your time, in case we lose you, go ahead and go first.
It may be cliche or whatever, but I got to give it to Donald Trump. What he's doing with tariffs. I know it's not the most popular thing, not exciting. I mean, my 401k took a big hit today, but when you look at politicians don't usually like to do the unpopular thing, the bad things that can hurt the economy initially. But I personally am looking at the long-term rewards. I deal with manufacturing on a day-to-day basis across Illinois. There are companies that are staying here now that were slated to move to Mexico that are now staying here because of Trump's, initially his proposed tariffs, but because of his tariffs. So I know it's not the most popular thing. I know it hurts us initially, but it's rare to get a politician that actually does what he says he's going to do and takes those bold actions, because it may not feel like it today, but those tariffs and bringing manufacturing back to this country is going to pay dividends in the future. And he may never get credit for it in the next 10 years, but you really got to be an OG to deliver on things even when they're hard. So,
Brad, I won't discredit that because we work with a lot of manufacturers and they agree with your premise. Closing the de minimis loophole was a big deal as well. What I will only add is have the guts to do the right thing and then also message it. That's our problem. Is I don't have a problem with the policies per se. It's how you do it. That's where Republicans tend to screw up. It's not necessarily what we do, it's how we do it. And that's the challenge here. That's the only thing I'll push back on. But
it's hard to message it though.
but at least try. Do something.
When you see
something.
when you see the headline, the Dow's down 1,600 points today, it's hard to message that. But
got the bully pulpit. At least give it a try.
Yep, that's right.
All right, who else has OGs or clowns? What do you guys got?
Here, let me go real quick because I've got a meeting that's getting ready to start. But I was just gonna say OG, my cousin ran for trustee in Cambria and he was the #2 vote getter, so I'm proud of him for that. And clown has got to be Brandon Johnson because he was down in St. Louis this weekend campaigning with the mayor, and she's going to go down in flames. I guess she didn't look at his approval rating before she asked him to come down and knock.
I mean, Brandon Johnson's on my list too for letting the teens and the kids just run rampant over the city of Chicago because he doesn't believe in curfews. So Johnson was on my list too. What else you guys got?
I got to jump in here. I got to do my OG of the week. We get a chance to talk about his race, but Dan Brady won for mayor, former state rep down in Bloomington. He ran a tough campaign, had 2 other challengers, got a huge part of the vote. Congratulations to Dan on his success down here. You know, a lot of times we talk a lot about some of the success up in the northern area. We got to remember our central and southern Illinois friends and family down there. So OG of the week for me goes to Dan Brady. And my clown of the week, right, are all of the haters that were giving me so much criticism and, nastiness and all that noise. I don't like to respond or raise the profile of all those carnival barkers, but today the clowns of the week are the carnival barkers.
That's right. My OG of the week is Aaron Del Mar for being the smartest Republican committee person in the entire state of Illinois. He cuts the best deals, folks. Don't we love him, folks? My clown of the week, I forgot it. I had it. My clown of the week is Elon Musk for putting all this money into Wisconsin and completely screwing the pooch up there, and the Republicans lose the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, and now he's out of the White House. Elon Musk, you are the clown of the week.
Hannah, you got somebody, or are you just enjoying the ride here?
No, I've got somebody. OG of the week would be the Florida Gators. They're about to be my clown of the week, but they pulled off their win in the last 3 minutes of their game. So really excited about their future this weekend. My silly Billy of the week, because I think clown of the week is a little too demeaning, would be that high school teacher in Downers Grove who was just charged with SAing a 15-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. And she said she was being targeted because she's too good looking. I just think there's a lot going on with that whole story. So, she definitely earned that award.
She's on my list. I'm going to name her because I don't mind. Christina Formella sexually assaulted a boy in her classroom. The story is disgusting. Bob Berlin is right. It's extremely disturbing. I'm glad you put her on the list. She was on my list as well. So I agree with that. Though I'll say clown, but I appreciate that you like to be a little more positive, and that's why I love you.
Just barely. I mean, Silly Billy is still pretty.
I like Silly Billy. I haven't heard Silly Billy's for a long time. I like it. All right, my OG is Steve McClure for Senate Bill 98. It's a common sense piece of legislation that focuses on making sure that those who conduct sexual assault in our classrooms and our schools are held accountable for it. Similarly, my clown of the week is the Democrats, including Democrats in leadership who won't let that bill see the light of day. This is a common sense bill where if you commit sexual violence or sexual assault on school grounds or as part of a school activity, you are expelled. You don't deserve to be in that school. This is something we can all agree on, but of course, Democratic leadership just has no interest in common sense legislation like this. So OG, but also kind of clown of the week. Also clown of the week, Harry Benton. I can't wait to see who it is that challenges him in the 97th district, whether it's Gabby Shanahan or somebody else. He's going to be even more vulnerable in 2026. Yes, he won. Congratulations. He won the local election he was running for. He is now double dipping. He's making twice as much off the taxpayers. I guarantee you, I haven't pulled it yet, but I guarantee you that when we pull this, it will not be super popular with the voters that he's double dipping among the voters. And so this makes the 97th district even more in play for Republicans, and I'm certainly not complaining about that. Another one of my clowns is the Chronicle, Illinois. Aaron was right. Dan Brady deserves a lot of praise for winning his race. The Chronicle, Illinois wrote up a whole piece online, which has since been removed and taken down, about how Bill Brady won the Bloomington mayor's race. And there was this whole write-up about Bill Brady and all the things he's done, all about Bill, about how he won the Bloomington mayor's race. That's how disengaged our media sometimes is, where they're not even paying attention. They just do a quick Google search, write up a whole piece, put it online. It was Dan Brady, not Bill Brady. So clown of the week right there. Last one I have here is just all those doom grifters pick them on the Democratic side. Because I'm telling you, every week every day, it's yet another story about how Republicans in D.C. are going to cut this huge program. They're going to kill people. The latest example of this is Trump cutting $125 million from the Illinois Department of Public Health. They said this impact is going to be profound, and Pritzker said it's going to kill people. And yet, when you look at the line by line of what this is actually cutting, it's cutting renovation of some labs, a surveillance system, an IT system. It's cutting a few staff members to run that surveillance system. It's cutting some technology updates, a communications and marketing campaign. That's the $125 million that's supposedly going to kill people. That's what Pritzker and the left and even the media is doing here. Every time Republicans in D.C. say, you know what, $125 million to go to your marketing campaign and lab upgrades when it was supposed to go towards COVID, yeah, that's not going to work. Give us that money back. You're not spending it for what we told you to spend it for. That's good government, fiscal policy, responsible fiscal management. And yet Pritzker and the Democrats every time this is going to murder kids and murder babies and it's the end of the world, when the reality just doesn't match up with their claims. So yet another clown of the week. All right, with that, closing thoughts. We are down to just the final four here. So closing thoughts. We'll let our guests go last. So Chris, go ahead with your closing thoughts.
I'll be quick because I think this is our longest podcast ever. If you work in politics in the state of Illinois, take a nap this weekend, go to the ball game, do something to get your mind off of the stupidity of politics in the state. It gets worse and worse every cycle. I don't know why I'm still doing it with my life. I have less and less hair every week because of it. By the end of my time on this podcast, I will be fully bald and I will be unmarriable to any woman I come across. So please get some rest, get your beauty sleep, and have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Thank you.
Chris says he will be unmarriable, like he didn't cross that Rubicon a long time ago. Aaron, you brought the heat, but let's be real, Hannah's cooler than you, so you get to go next. Aaron, what's up?
No, thanks for having me on, Collin. It was a great opportunity. I appreciate the platform to kind of get my message out there about some of the things that have been, thrown at me. So that's always cool. I think that my final thoughts of this: we have a great opportunity in 26. We need to engage. We need to get excited about it. We got to get positive and give everybody a little bit of grace. And if we do so, I think we're going to have some great success. And I look forward to having that opportunity to be a part of our party. I'm not ashamed. I'm ready to go. I'm powered up.
All right. And no more mistaken Friday night social media posts. We got this thing under lock.
Yeah, that's funny.
It's inside joke that some of you may get. All right, Hannah, what's your final word? You get the final word for the week.
Yeah, I love the final word. Well, thanks for having me on. This has been so fun. And I would say to all of those millions of listeners out there, tomorrow, the next day, all the days to come, major on the majors and minor on the minors. For those wanting to get stuff done in politics, I'm sure that's why you listen to this. Let's just focus on unity and not expect uniformity in the next cycle.
Nice. Well, we're going to have in 2 weeks the Great Illinois Republican Debate as our 100th episode. We've got some awesome guests lined up. We're going to say all the things that, frankly, people are afraid to say. Why can't we get along as Republicans, as conservatives, as grassroots, as establishment? How in the hell can we find some way to work together so we can start to win in this state. We're going to debate it all live. Well, not live, but all in the air. It's going to be 2 weeks for SFR's 100th episode. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, self-medicate if you need to. Let's get this shit figured out and let's do a better job. Let's go out and win. Thank you, everybody, for your time. We'll catch you next week.